Let's stick with the spring meetings of the World Bank and the IMF, entering its fourth day today, and it's been so far dominated by not-so-cheering review of the state of the global economy and geopolitics, as well as concerns of uncertainties about the future. Let's go to Washington, D.C. now for some perspectives on the meeting with Agnes Gitau. She's the Executive Director overseeing the UK and EU at the Eastern African Association. Madam, a good afternoon to you there in Washington, D.C. 4 days of your boots on the ground, the spring meetings. What have you been able to piece together?
Thank you very much, Boston, and I'm sorry about the sound issues earlier on. It's been an intenseful and very insightful few days, but what is clear, Boston, is that the global economic narrative is shifting from just responding to crisis to navigating the ongoing complex issues. For our continent, the continent of Africa, this means we need to find a way of balancing our debt. We need to find ways of controlling inflation, and of course, the need for growth-focused investment. There is a very strong emphasis on restoring fiscal space and ensuring that countries can afford affordable capital, issues that are very relevant for us. There's also growing momentum around, and of course, you've heard from the Kenyan president, reforming the global financial architecture, which is key for fairer representation and financial terms for developing countries.
So what are the key issues for Africa at the meetings, Madam? Do you think the continent is getting the right amount of attention there at the tables with President Trump, the China trade war, Ukraine, Russia, the war in the Middle East and all of that? Do you think the continent, Africa, is getting enough share of attention?
Look, what do we bring to the table? I think the only way we can get the right attention, the only way we can get these policymakers, the big boys who determine the global economy, is really being strategic in our approach, but also asking ourselves, what is our continent bringing to the table? Of course, issues around debt sustainability, issues that matter to us, climate crisis, access to finance for private sector, opportunities to scale growth that is sustainable. I mean, Africa is not getting the right attention, not for lack of participation. I have seen Boston droves of delegations from the continent, most of them shopper-driven. But when I think of the issues that are critical to us, I don't know. I don't know whether we should be here. I don't know whether we have the right people negotiating for our continent. But look, it's a time for us to re-engage, be strategic. I have constantly spoken about the importance of collective approach to negotiation, away from individual countries approaching this negotiation as individuals. A collective African voice is what will mean that will make us get the right attention.
Okay, so the latest IMF economic outlook shows some good spots in Africa as far as economic forecast is concerned for this year and next. Senegal, here in West Africa, is forecast to grow about 8.6%. It's said to be the poster boy, as it were, right now for economic growth in Africa. Ethiopia, 6.6% for this year, revised slightly higher by the IMF. Nigeria, 3%. South Africa, however, 1%, very at the bottom of the pyramid, as it were. Are there reasons for optimism for the continent, in your view, Agnes?
Boston, cautious optimism given the global uncertainty. And you're absolutely right. Countries like Senegal, Ethiopia, countries, Nigeria, where you are showing some signs of recovery. And this really is a sign that reforms. Ethiopia has really taken ambitious economic reform leadership in some of the countries is the way forward. We've also seen Senegal's growth is really driven by new oil and gas production coming online. Ethiopia recovery also is post the Tigray crisis, which we saw 2 years ago. But even Nigeria, 3%, I think is a sign of stabilization, but also a sign of that the administration policies are beginning to bear fruit. But we can't sit pretty. There is much more for us to do. And GDP alone, Boston, really doesn't mean anything for the common man struggling to make ends meet, for the small businesses, finding it absolutely difficult to access capital, for governments really struggling to repay debt, making it very difficult for them to invest in public sector like healthcare and education because of our debt obligation. This growth really, for me, is great, but what does that mean? We still have key fundamentals that we need to address as a continent.
Yeah, well, speaking about debt, Zimbabwe, according to news reports, has gotten a window to enter into a staff-monitored program with the IMF. That came yesterday, and that looked like some positive news for Zimbabwe, struggling for many years. I'm sure President Ruto in Kenya just came back from China. He's finally gotten the Hilton and Intercontinental hotels, two iconic hotels, finally to be taken over by the Chinese. The last time I was in Nairobi, those hotels where facilities were still under lock and key for a number of years. So do you think that African leaders are right now shopping both left, right, and center, whether Washington or Beijing, just to ensure that there's development, that so much needed investment comes to the table?
Look, Boston, I think Africa's approach really, it has been non-alignment, really speaking to all partners, be it the East or West. You know, we need to bring in diversified partnership. We need to ensure that our sources of FDI are diversified without really having just all our eggs in the same basket, right? But this comes with challenges. I'm sure China will demand that Africans explore our relationship. You know, your enemy becomes my enemy. Your friend is my friend, right? But look, it's great to hear that President Ruto has managed to get private investment into Kenya's hotel pipeline. You're right; these are very significant properties at very strategic locations in the capital of Nairobi, and the reason they close is because of COVID crisis, but also lack of investment. So it's great to see some of these state-owned properties being extending invitation to private sector to participate in them. Look, it doesn't matter whether it's Chinese or it's Americans. You know, capital knows no color, no religion, no race, right? The continent needs money. We need financing to drive growth. We need financing to rebuild and restore our economies.
Very interesting. You got a couple of more days there in Washington. Thank you so much, Agnes Gitau, the Executive Director at the Eastern African Association for UK and the EU, and the Managing Partner at GBS Africa. Thank you so much for those insights from the World Bank and the IMF Spring meetings in Washington.